Welcome to the Shaltazar Podcast. My name is Jeffrey Eisen. I am a spiritual life coach, channeler of Shaltazar, and an energy intuitive. This podcast is about using spiritual wisdom, insights, principles, and practices to integrate and embody into your life in a practical way. My guests share their story of their spiritual journey, as well as how their spiritual beliefs, insights, and practices have helped them live a better life. Their life stories help others understand and accept life's challenging opportunities for learning, expansion, and growth. The Shaltazar Podcast is all about integrating spiritual wisdom into your life in a practical way. My guest on the podcast today is Samantha Abrahams from the greater New York area. I think I've mentioned before, I'm so lucky to be able to meet so many amazing people to have on my podcast, and I hope you, the listeners, appreciate the diversity of talent that we have on this show. Samantha is from the greater New York City area. Samantha, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Jeffrey. I'm so excited to be here today.
Samantha, first of all, I'm going to tell the listeners that I believe we met on LinkedIn, and it's so interesting how Spirit allows me to meet so many amazing people in a very serendipitous way and find a true connection. And I certainly felt that with Samantha. She is an amazing healer. She is a worker of the light, and she is doing amazing things on the planet. Samantha, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and about your life journey and your spiritual journey to get us started.
Okay. Well, thank you for that introduction. I'm just as happy to have connected with you. So yeah, my name is Samantha Abrahams, and I live in Greenwich, Connecticut, just outside of New York City. And that's where I have my own business called Optimal Healing Modalities, or Om for Wellness. And I offer a lot of different healing modalities in the work I do, which keeps it really exciting for me. You know, I love the work I do. I love connecting with people and sharing what I know and what I'm passionate about, which is healing and movement and intuition and body work. So, you know, I really consider myself a self-care advocate and holistic healing facilitator. I've studied a lot of different healing modalities along the way, and some have been, I found, to be very complicated, and others have just been really user-friendly. And those are more of the ones that I'm trying to share with people that may not have the same enthusiasm about healing that I do, but could still really benefit from healing and doing their own work. You know, I look at being able to do our own work as a privilege, not something to check off the to-do list, or you know, it's, for me, it's kind of a way of living. I live a self-care lifestyle, and sometimes it's not easy, but I think the effort that I put in is well worth it, and it allows me to share my experience with people and connect with people and learn together how to really live a life where you're invested in putting your spirit first and cultivating that conversation together, and living it in your daily life, you know, really making it a part of your daily life.
Right. Healing certainly is a journey, and I find personally that there's often, first of all, I think one of the points I want to make is that healing is a very personal journey, and thank heavens there are so many amazing healing modalities out there. And I totally recommend for people to find a modality that resonates with you. I think that's really important. Yeah, there is no one size fits all. And the other comment I want to make is that healing is also about the connection, and it's between the person that is seeking the healing and the person that is providing the healing. And there's an energetic exchange. It's more than, sometimes with traditional medicine, we just go to the doctor and there isn't quite that connection because the doctor tells you what to do and you abide by it. And the healing, the alternative care healing modalities are much different. There's a greater interconnection between the healer and the person being healed. Would you agree with that, Samantha?
Yeah, and I think the important part of that connection, and that's why I think it's so great that there are so many different modalities that people can choose from. And if one doesn't work, I just encourage people to continue to seek out another, because eventually you will find something that resonates with you and that speaks to you on a deeper level. And no matter what healing modality it is, it's really about you helping you find that connection with yourself first, and those different aspects of yourself, your body, your mind, your emotions, and your spirit. They are all, what I believe anyways, and the way I look at holistic healing, internally, it's all one thing. We can understand things as these separate parts, at least intellectually, but inside our bodies, we can't separate out our thoughts from our emotions, from our spirit, from our physical body. It's all one thing. So, it's important that you have that connection with yourself and all those different aspects of yourself. And that allows you to take care of yourself in the best way possible. And also, when different things come up in your life, to be able to adjust and make changes around that as well.
Mm-hmm. You raised an interesting point, and that is that, to find, we both talked about finding the healing modality that works for you. But for some of our listeners and for some people out there, that can be a bit intimidating. One thing that I have found in alternative healing is sometimes it's even hard to understand what it's all about, because you read it and you read it and you read it again and you say, what is that all about? So do you have any advice for listeners who feel a bit intimidated and overwhelmed about trying to find the right healing modality for them?
So I'm a big believer that everybody has intuitive capacities. And it's really just a matter of first somebody reminding you, which hopefully just hearing that, it can wake people up to the idea or possibility that they can be intuitive, even if they don't think they are. But, to just start somewhere, to whatever is going on with you, whether it's something physical, a new diagnosis that might be a little scary, or something happening in a relationship, if you feel drawn to a different career path, these life changes that just come up. When you're seeking help, to first just kind of go with your gut of what's standing out to you. And that can come in any way. It could come from an email getting sent to you, and suddenly you hear of a new acupuncturist in town, or a friend of yours mentioning a healer that they go to, or a great body worker that they go to, or how a movement method like Pilates or yoga really spoke to them. And suddenly you feel your interest piqued and you want to look into it more, to just kind of trust that. And then if you go and give that a try, that, and say you don't like it, that could lead you to other avenues. So I think once you start on that path and you start trying things out, you'll just naturally come to a place where you get a better understanding of what you need and what works the best for you. And again, that can change over time. One healer or healing method that worked for you at one time is specific for that time. or it could serve you over a long period of time. But, I like to kind of really trust my intuition on those things. And I think that's not unique to me. I think everybody has the ability to do that.
I would agree. I think often we feel healing is a logical and linear process. And I'm a great fan of the internet, but I know when people are sick or have maladies, the first place they go is the internet, and they try to self-diagnose and they try to solve their problem from their intellect. And I would agree with you. I don't think that that's the right approach. I really think the right approach is to take more of that intuitive pathway to know, to just jump in and get a sense of what feels right. You mentioned going to one modality and not liking it. Shaltazar says that we learn by comparison. So
Yes.
often we need to experience something that doesn't work for us in order to come to something that does work for us. And so I think that's important. While you were talking, you mentioned, if a friend tells you about an acupuncturist, one of the things that I always go by is if I hear something more than once, if I hear it twice or three times from different people, I know that's the universe tapping me on the shoulder and suggesting that I go that route. So
Yeah.
certainly I concur with that. And having been on my journey for about 17 years, I would definitely agree that that we grow in and out of modalities, that sometimes we'll go through a period where it's the physical modalities, other times it will be the mental emotional modalities, sometimes it will be the spiritual modalities. And I just want to emphasize what you talked about, the holistic healing. I think that is so important. Often people are trying to look at their healing in a compartmentalized way. They're trying to look at it in these silos of, this is my physical and this is my emotional, but they're all tied together. I know often I work with people on the mental, emotional, and spiritual, and some of their physical maladies will shift when we are able to shift some of their emotional or spiritual issues. So we are all connected. I'm a big fan of holistic healing. So get out there and keep trying. It's sort of like when a friend gives you a book and you read it and you say, no, I didn't really like that book. But then another friend gives you another book and it's fantastic and fascinating. And next thing you know, you've read all of the books by that author. And so I think healing is that journey where you just sort of follow the breadcrumbs.
Absolutely. And the other thing about it, when you asked about trying out different things and figuring out which one works the best for you or which you like the best, with healing, I think you can't just read a description of it and decide if it's going to work for you or not, because healing is such an experiential process, and it's an embodied process. So whether you are working towards healing emotional or mental or spiritual disharmonies that come up, we're human beings. So you have to have an embodied experience of that. And when there's so much wisdom in the body. So when you bring those things back to the connection that they do have with your physicality and with your body, that's when you actually get to experience your emotions in a different way that can be powerful in the sense that it can change your perspective and it can change your outlook and your understanding and your learning along the way. And really healing is so much about what you need to learn to be present with where you're at in your life and move forward in a positive way so that you can keep unfolding and growing the truth of who you are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you, Samantha. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your personal history and your personal journey, your own personal healing journey, how you got into the healing arts. We've chatted before, so you didn't start in that direction. You started somewhere else. And some of your spiritual beliefs, because this podcast is about helping people integrate and embody spiritual principles in a very practical way. And we've certainly started out in the right direction by telling people about the healing arts and how you can navigate that journey, because the path is getting a bit crowded, which is really great. There are so many amazing healers coming up. So why don't you just share a bit with our listeners your personal history and how you got into the healing arts?
Sure. So a lot of what I'm going to share, I have to admit, I can only share in hindsight. And, I think looking back, I think I was just born with a strong intuition and a strong empathy, which a lot of times when I was younger showed up as being maybe overly sensitive, maybe overly dramatic at times. But, when I was really young, I think I didn't need an explanation for it. It was just kind of an understanding of the way that my world was. I feel like I had a really deep connection with nature, with animals, with something bigger than me, but I didn't have to make sense of that. It just kind of was the way I was. And then I think somewhere along the way, I started to feel strange when I would compare myself to other people, and especially other people that from the outside seemed to know better than me.
Or so you thought at the time.
So I thought, but I think, again, somewhere along the way, I kind of disconnected from that intuitive, sensitive part of me because, again, nothing conscious, but I think there was a fear of, where do I belong in what seems to me that I'm so different than other people in the way that they perceive things and understand things. So I think part of my journey was looking outside of me to understand who I was and kind of, in certain ways, giving power over to other people or other situations to tell me who I was. And I definitely wouldn't recommend that because I think it brings up a lot of fear. And I think that it creates trust issues and issues of faith, or, challenges with having faith and just kind of feeling safe in the world. But going through that, it led me down a path where I really wanted to find those things and become grounded again and enjoy the experience of being a human being and being in a body and all of those things. So, I like to say that I'm a spirit having a human experience, and it's not the other way around. And yet I find it's something that I have to be conscious of and continue to work on to live my daily life that way. I call it, for myself personally, living spirit forward, to put my spirit in the forefront of my life when just normal daily things come up that might aggravate me or annoy me. That's kind of the reality of it. And so I went to college for dance, and that really helped me. Dance was really a big part of leading me down the path towards healing because it gave me an outlet to have a voice through my body in a way that I struggled a little to feel secure to articulate with my voice alone. And then when I finished with dance, I started to study Pilates and massage therapy. And that opened me up to the world of healing, starting with Reiki. And I just got hooked. I just couldn't learn enough about what was this energy stuff. And I could sense that it was working, but I wanted to know how, and I wanted to know why. And that kind of led me down a path of studying everything I could, and even going to graduate school to study spiritual healing and holistic health. And it was like I wanted somebody to tell me and prove it to me, give me the proof that this stuff works. And it didn't give me that, but it gave me the freedom to really circle back around to trusting that I've experienced enough that I know that I have the capacity to heal. I know that I have a strong intuition. I know that I can trust it, and I know that I can share it with other people. So today it's more of a joy and a freedom to be able to do it probably than it ever has been before in my life. And I'm really grateful for that.
Excellent. Excellent. I just want to circle back a little bit, because you did talk about that you had it and you sort of maybe didn't have the confidence in your healing ability and lost it, and then came back around again. And thank heavens you did get that do-over. And your path is not a lot different than a lot of other people. But there are a lot of young people coming up, and if we're going to truly heal the planet, it would kind of be nice for them to believe in their gifts and not have to be taken away, not doubting them, not taking that hiatus for 5 or 10 years, trying to fit into society. And some of them, unfortunately, never come back to the healing arts, and some of them, like you, do. What advice would you give to the listeners? What advice would you give to the younger version of yourself so that you could have maybe acted upon your gifts at an earlier stage in your life?
Wow, that's a great question. If I could go back and speak to my younger self, what would I tell her?
Yeah.
I would tell her that, there is so much time and energy that can be lost and wasted to fear. And that to really embrace the opportunities to connect to what you really believe and what really matters to you internally. So again, I think there's so much external stimulation for that youth can struggle with, and there's so much expected of them too. And so I think just like it did with me, it can kind of take you outside of yourself. And so I facilitate what's called intuitive listening, and it's a more structured way to slow down and listen to the different aspects of your intuition. And it doesn't have to be necessarily that way, but just for young people to have a way to be able to listen within themselves and give just as much credit to that as to what they're experiencing externally, or their accomplishments, or what they think they should do. It's more about focusing on who you really are, and what that means, and why you want to show up in a certain way in your relationships or whatever work you feel drawn towards, to kind of have that inner communication of continually checking in with yourself. But again, going back to my journey, without the apprehension or without so much self-doubt. So I also feel like in isolation, that's a difficult thing to achieve. So I think it would be great if there was a way where young people could share that experience with each other, because I always think creating a community and that sort of connection helps it to build into something that can be understood as a reality. A lot of the work that I did, I felt along the way, am I making this up? Is this, am I crazy? There was that kind of back conversation that would just slow down the process for me or kind of keep me from moving forward and just getting out of it. It just kind of I kept getting in my own way with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if there were more of a community that could normalize it, just like I was saying, that healing ourselves is a very normal and natural thing. Having an intuition and really discerning our own personal language of intuition is a very normal and natural thing. So I think just normalizing it and getting a little bit more free about it would be really helpful.
Right. And I love the idea of support. As you were talking, I was thinking, well, why, if the schools have the band club and the drama club and the key club, and I don't know if they still have key club. I guess I'm showing my age, but we have all of these. We have the football club and we've got basketball club, but we don't have the intuition club. And so, and I'm not sure that schools are ready yet. And this is speaking directly to parents of children who are highly gifted or intuitive. Try to encourage them to cultivate that intuition, to cultivate their relationship to the invisible world, because I have seen so many gifted healers that I have worked with that had this gift early on, and just like you, lost it because of peer pressure, because it wasn't supported by family and friends. And we are at an age, Shaltazar says, that we are in the energy of great potential for change, and that no change is not an option. So if we could start cultivating those that have the gift, and we all have the gift, but if they recognize it at a younger age, if we could support them, cultivate it, and not make them feel so odd and out of place, I think that we would have an opportunity to have more light workers and more healers stepping up to the plate.
Yeah, and I think for parents too, I'm not a parent myself, but I think for parents to be able to recognize these things in their kids starts with being able to recognize them within themselves. So, for parents to be able to cultivate their intuition, or that inner communication, inner listening, inner language with themselves about their feelings and their thoughts and their connection to their own spiritual understanding and how that all plays out within their bodies. If parents can kind of model that for their kids, I think that would be an amazing place to start. And then also to be able to encourage their children, because, it's one thing to have a community of, say, teens, for example, that are working together, but, to be encouraged to cultivate their gifts by their family and by their parents. And again, have that common language, I think would be really powerful also.
Yeah, exactly. We've certainly come a long way from the time we burned the witches at the stake. And the good news is that there are a lot of people, in their 20s and 30s that have gone on their journey. And as they have children, I think they're more apt to be open. So I concur with you that as parents go on the journey, because you don't know that you may have a tremendously gifted healer as one of your children, and just your encouragement, just your nurturing, just your accepting of their gift could make a tremendous difference in the healing of the planet.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe you want to share with the listeners a little bit of how you integrate your spiritual beliefs and practices into your life. How does it work? How can you've made a pitch for intuition, you've made a pitch for intuitive listening, and I'm a big fan of both of those. But what's your experience in terms of how it helps your everyday human life?
Yeah, so I am a very spiritual person, but I'm also a very structured person as well. And I find that structure helps me. So especially when it comes to what I do daily. So, waking up and starting my day with prayer, and doing some sort of, again, as a former dancer, movement is very important for me to feel good in my body. I do Pilates and the MELT method, which again, I also teach. And I do my own daily intuitive listening work. And sometimes that might look like 5 minutes of intuitive listening practice. And other times that could be an hour to 90 minutes if I have the time, or if there's a deeper issue that's come up and I just need to spend a little bit more time delving into everything that's going on. And again, these are all things that I enjoy. These are all things that really feel like they enrich my life, because they allow me to feel more connected, not just to myself, but to everybody else in my life. So for example, if something's running me around, whether it's my thinking or my emotions, and it might feel a little ungrounding or distracting, rather than I'm just in my day, I'm attending to what's in front of me. I'm not worried about the next thing. I'm not concerned about what happened yesterday. I'll look at what's going on. I'll listen for, okay, well, this is strange. What's happening here? And with intuitive listening, I can get to some of the underlying issues. Sometimes that underlying issue could be an emotional root issue from my past. Sometimes it could be something structurally where, something's off in my body. So the intuitive listening is a really important part of that for me. And that is based on the work of Karen Kremasco, who is one of my greatest mentors, I would say. And she developed Intending Wellness, which are healing intentions that you offer yourself, and you, again, listen and notice for the indication of change that tells you that there's been some shift in awareness or physically that's happened. And it could be a change in your breathing. It could be reduction in a symptom. So if you have a headache, your headache could be relieved a little bit, or it could be an insight that you get while you're doing the work that helps you to make sense of whatever brought you to doing the work in the first place. So again, it's really, for me, practicing different things that allow me to shift my consciousness to a better state of acceptance and ease and peace. These days, more than at any time in my life, I just want things to be easy. And so, yeah, so all the work I do, I hate to even call it work, because it's just my way of continuing to cultivate the level of peace and ease in my life, and the level of harmony in my life that I really want to experience.
Right. And certainly from my perspective, handing over the reins of control, handing over the compass to your intuition as opposed to your logical mind can pay off big time in your life. And it certainly does take credit, because most of us are brought up believing in logic and linearity. And intuition is something that is less definitive. It certainly requires trust. But I certainly can say for myself that my life has changed considerably for the better by allowing my intuitive listening and my intuitive guidance to lead the way. And I know Samantha agrees with that as well. And so I encourage the listeners to just dabble in that a little bit and realize that there are these two consciousnesses that can lead the way: your intellect, which I think society has put a little bit too much emphasis on, and then there's the intuition that, because we don't understand it, we tend not to follow it quite as much. So a lot of people certainly talk about intuition, the gut feeling, They talk about the sixth sense. I encourage the listeners to try it out. I even find it easier to get parking spots in busy parking lots using my intuition. So there are a lot of practical applications to using your intuition. I could chat with you for hours and hours, Samantha. We're just about drawing close to the end of the episode. Before we do, I'd like you to maybe share with the listeners how they can get in touch with you and what you're available to do. Our listeners are from all over the world, so some of them don't have access to you physically in the greater New York area, but I'm sure that you would entertain connecting with them over the internet.
Absolutely. And I just want to say one more thing based on what you just said. And in terms of spiritual wisdom, we have our intellect and our intuition. We have our head and our heart. And because we have both, we kind of need to learn how to balance both, because one without the other, it's just not going to have the same impact. So, I think having a process where we don't say that one is better than the other, but it's important to use both of those together.
I agree 100%. You're right on. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And so, I do work in person with people and offer workshops. But, for the people that are not in my local area, I'm still able to do intuitive listening over the phone is where or how I facilitate the intuitive listening sessions. And that's with individuals. It could be with couples who want to work together. And then I also love working with people and their animal companions. And all of that can be done over the phone.
And how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think the best way to get in touch with me is to go to my website, because that has all of my contact information. But my website is www.ohm for wellness. So OHMFORWELLNES, www.ohmforwellness.com.
Perfect. And Samantha's bio and her contact information will be in the description of this episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for being an amazing guest, Samantha. I really enjoyed having you. Once again, this is the Shaltazar Podcast. My name is Jeffrey Eisen. I am a spiritual life coach, channeler of Shaltazar, and an energy intuitive. Please check out my website, jeffreyeisen.com. There's lots of great content. There are the Shaltazar Podcast, the Messages of Shaltazar. There's blogs. There's a new series that I have partnered with a gentleman by the name of Mark Lane out of Chicago. He's a brilliant writer, and it's called Impressions of Shaltazar. And he dissects and puts into beautiful prose a lot of the teachings from Shaltazar. Thank you for listening. I encourage you to share these podcasts with your friends. Sign up to my newsletter list by going onto the website, again, at jeffreyeisen.com. And for doing so, I will give you one of the very powerful Shaltazar messages, The True Purpose of Human Life. Once again, my name is Jeffrey Eisen. Samantha Abrahams, thank you for being an amazing guest. Any last words?
Thank you, Jeffrey. It was my pleasure.
Excellent. Love and light to you all. Thanks for listening.